The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Jesus said to his disciples, "I have much more to tell you, but you cannot bear it now. But when he comes, the Spirit of truth, he will guide you to all truth. He will not speak on his own, but he will speak what he hears, and will declare to you the things that are coming. He will glorify me, because he will take from what is mine and declare it to you. Everything that the Father has is mine. For this reason I told you that he will take from what is mine and declare it to you." The Gospel of the Lord. This morning's readings from the Acts of the Apostles. St. Paul stood up in the middle of the Areopagus and said, "You Athenians, I see that in every respect you are very religious." As I was reflecting on this line this morning, it brought a question to my mind I'd like to propose to each of you. St. Paul notes that these people are very religious. And the question I have for you all is it even possible to not be religious? Is it even possible to not be religious? I would argue that every person is deeply religious. It's just a matter of what your religion is. Everyone has a certain religious view of the world, and everyone in a religious way gives themselves over to something and commits their time and energy to what they see as the most valuable, and that is their religion. I think one of the lies in our culture today is that we have this idea that someone can be truly secular or someone can be neutral when it comes to religion. It's not true. Everyone has a religion, and everyone gives themselves to something. What we misunderstand in our culture is that when somebody says that they are secular or they are not religious, what they are really saying is they are against the established religions. When someone says they are an atheist, it's not so much that they just don't believe in God, it's that they are anti-God. You can see that in our culture today. I think we have seen this over these past couple of years. You might call the new religion that is becoming dominant in our culture, you could call it many different names. You could call it leftism. You could call it secular progressivism. It's been called Marxism. Some people just call it plain old secularism. Maybe you could call it relativism, modernism. It's all sorts of different names. But make no mistake, it is a religion. Have you ever noticed, for example, that in our modern culture, the culture no longer celebrates Christian feast days, but it has secular feast days of President's Day or Martin Luther King Day. Instead of Advent and Lent, you have Black History Month or Women's History Month or any of the following. There is a new liturgical calendar in our culture. During the pandemic, many churches were closed down. And yet, if people were going to protest against racism, that was allowed, right? Because that is the new religious virtues of our culture. It's no longer so much important to overcome our personal sins, but in order to overcome our cultural sins of racism and intolerance and the like, we must be permitted to practice them. It's something that I think many people didn't realize. What the culture was saying is that church no longer matters, but this new religious right of protesting is what truly matters. It's a new religion. In our schools, you're no longer allowed to pray or to teach Christianity, and yet you can still indoctrinate students with false ideologies, like gender ideology and race criticism ideologies. Right? Make no mistake about it. No matter what your political views are, no matter what religion you hold, everybody is religious. might be thinking I'm saying this and just being crazy. The person who first revealed this to me was a man named John Paul II. You may have heard of him. He gave a very phenomenal speech when he came to the United States in the 1950s. He came to Philadelphia, and he spoke at the Eucharistic Congress in the United States. And he was commenting on his experience in Poland and experiencing the effects of communism. And one of the things he said during his speech is he said, people need to understand that this is not a political revolution. This is not a political problem. What we are witnessing in our world is anti-Christianity. It's the testing of 2,000 years of Christian tradition, of Christian values. And what we are experiencing is an utter rebellion against that tradition and against that history. It's one of the reasons why the communists, when they took over Russia, one of the things they would do is specifically target the church. One of the first things the Russians did when they took power is they began to convert monasteries into gulags. They began to blame churches for the famines, for the hunger. One of the things that they did is they wrote national articles asking monasteries and churches to empty themselves of all of their gold and silver chalices for the sake of feeding the poor. Why did they do that? Because they knew if the churches agreed, they would be emptying the churches of their beauty. And they knew if the churches refused to hand over their sacred vessels, then they could blame the starvation on the churches. In our culture, we are still seeing something very similar. Just because people aren't calling themselves communists doesn't mean they aren't doing the very same thing. So many of the same tactics are being used in our own age. And I think we would be foolish as Christians and as Catholics to think that it's merely politics or mere cultural values or mere politically correctness. Make no mistake, there are two religions at war with each other. The more conservative Christian tradition versus the new progressive secularism, which goes by many different names.